Welcome to the FMCG podcast. Make sure you're following us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us out. Enjoy the show. Hi, my name is Rich and we're Consumer Hub, and this is the FMCG podcast where we speak to leaders within the food and drink industry and hear their category insights into product and channel, but also their insights into leadership within FMCG. We're really excited to have Liam on the show today from LoveRaw. We absolutely love their products, and Liam is going to be getting into their story and also his story today. Liam, thanks for coming on the show. It's great to have you. Just tell us a bit about you and what you're doing at LoveRaw. Just give us an intro into that. Would be really good for everybody to understand.
Hi, yes, good morning, and thanks for having me on. Kind of quick overview of my story. Firstly, I probably fell into sales, to be honest, and so where I am today wasn't really my original career ambition, and my original goal was to move into sort of like sports nutrition. That was my passion growing up, so I studied that at university, and my head was at, right, this is where I want to go. So did a season working in football, at sort of the back office at Shrewsbury within the sports medicine team, and kind of quickly realised that in that team sport sector was not really for me, just too many personality clashes. And then a job came up at Tesco for a sports nutritionist. So I thought, oh wow, this sounds right up my street. So relocated down to the Midlands to work in the store in Dudley. It's for a business called NutriCentre, which at the time was one of the Tesco-owned businesses, and absolutely loved it. It was incredible. And I had the opportunity to go from a store level, essentially selling supplements and speaking to customers and getting their needs and ambitions, to a head office level. So at that time, I was then trying to steer and shape the strategy of the category with the brands that I was then buying into to be on the shelf, and got to know one brand very well, which was Grenade. And from seeing their products in store to how they impact the sort of customer level, it's very different. And I hate to use the word game changer, but in that category at the time, it genuinely was.
Yeah.
And my role at NutriCentre was unfortunately being made redundant. So I then ended up working for Grenade, and that was like my dream job. Like I couldn't have asked for a better role, to be honest. The team was fantastic, and Juliet, who was one of the co-founders there, in some of my first interviews, like, "I want you to think of convenience." And I remember sitting there thinking, "Yeah, I think it's a good thing." And in my head, I was thinking, does she mean this or does she mean that? And I thought, you know what, let's just go for it, because I'm here. I'm not going to fail. So then I quickly learned what convenience was and what it was all about. It was my first experience as sort of on a supplier side, really. And absolutely loved it. Over 4.5 years I was there. I like to think I got to know the industry very, very well. And we had a great time doing what we were doing, kind of spearheading the growth of that protein bar category in convenience. Got it up to multi-million pound revenue over that time. At the height, we even had about 79% market share in sort of that petrol forecourt industry, which is pretty much unheard of. And loads of fantastic achievements that we got. The first protein bar we launched into Marks and Spencer's, first protein bar that we launched into Costa Coffee. So all these accolades that we achieved were phenomenal. But sort of towards the end of my time there, it was during the pandemic, and we moved from an office-based environment to working from home. And my role changed, unfortunately, I say unfortunately now, looking back, to a food service role. And that was right at the time the pandemic hit, when that channel pretty much shut down. So it led to, a bit of frustration, because you're thinking, oh, God, I can't do what I'm really good at. And I thought, on reflection, I pretty much ran my race in terms of what I can do at Grenade. And Juliet, one of the co-founders who I mentioned earlier of Grenade, was a non-exec director here at LoveRaw. So I had the opportunity to come and meet the guys here and understand a bit more about what they're doing, what their ambition was. And there's so many similarities to that kind of first interview that I had at Grenade. Like, you just got the sense that something was bubbling.
Do you know what convenience was this time, though?
Yeah. Keep my poker face, though, you know. So I joined the business here in August 2020, and it was a smaller business in terms of the scale of what we were doing than the time I joined Grenade. But it had so many of the credentials and ingredients of success that Grenade had. So now I've been here for nearly 3 years. It's been such a great journey because we've achieved so much, but there's still so much to do. And this category that we're playing in is exciting. It's vibrant, and it is going places. And it'd be amazing if it got to the heights of the protein bar category, which I do genuinely believe it will. But it's not without hard work and dedication. So yeah, that's kind of my story to where I am today. So yeah, circumstance and relationships really get you here.
And what about LoveRaw itself? Can you give us a bit of a window into their story as well, and kind of the journey they've been on? Because obviously you've come in at this point, it'd be great to understand where they've come from, what the actual product concept is, and what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started in 2013. So last week was our 10th birthday, which coincidentally was the same week as one of our founders' 40th birthdays. So I'm sure that he got the certificate of incorporation just to make sure that he was 40 on the 10th birthday. But we haven't done chocolate is relatively new in our journey. From 2013 up to around 2018, it was sort of superfood powders, and sort of like cold press fruit and seed bars. And then we actually get like an alternative milk made with almond milk. But then we were thinking, right, what is our identity? What do we stand for as a brand? Because we're performing in several categories, putting quality at the forefront of what we do. But what do consumers know us for? And at that time, Rimi's father fell ill, and sadly, shortly later, passed away. But it gave Rimi a time of reflection, really, to think around what's important to her, and health and nutrition was at the forefront. And she followed a plant-based diet, and she wanted to essentially create a chocolate that she could really enjoy, and created in her kitchen, through many different trials and tribulations, a peanut butter cup, different to the ones that exist today, but same in its principle. And we first got a retail listing with Whole Foods Market in London, and Rimi, in kind of true LoveRaw fashion, just hustled her way in there. And she spent some time living in Spain, and coincidentally, the buyer, she didn't have a meeting with this guy, but he was Spanish, so they had a connection, and they just hit it off. Got a listing, and generally sold about 12,000 units in the first week. And that was scary because you're operating out of a kitchen and needed that immediate resource. So brought in all the family to help scale. And then she started to move into, production facilities, etc. But that really is where it started to snowball for the brand. And the real catalyst would be largely during the pandemic. It sounds controversial, but that's a point in time where a lot of people working from home or on furlough really engage with their own health through platforms on social media. So we saw a lot more engagement in our category at that point in time, and that was where the heights of sort of like the immediate rapid delivery businesses. They were coming out, sort of like the Gorillas at the time, and Wheezy and Gatir. So it was given that opportunity to get product into consumers' hands for those that couldn't go to stores. And then as the lockdown phases were coming out, we saw a huge growth in our category. which is really exciting. And obviously then coupled with retail listings, it just made the product and brand more available. And now it's just continuing to gather momentum. We as a brand, but also the category is not slowing down. The consumer numbers are growing exponentially. And we want to be that brand of choice that consumers go to enjoy, chocolate that just happens to be vegan.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, and interesting to hear how the kind of concept has sort of stayed the same in terms of putting health at the front of the agenda, but actually the product solutions changed. But I think that says a lot about kind of good brands, really, that, fundamentally the problem you're trying to solve stays the same, the mission's there, but you can try different solutions. And obviously we probably discovered LoveRaw in the pandemic, if I think about it, actually, because we just started. There's no recruitment to do. We didn't want to be like just furloughed and bored. So we just started reviewing loads of snack brands because it's what we're interested in. And that's what this podcast came out of. And I remember Harry just ordering like a ton of stuff off Cardo that looked good. And all these other there was just loads of businesses and started selling interesting brands online. I can't remember all the names. So we just got loads of stuff and we were just trying it. And LoveRaw kind of was one that we hit on that we really liked. But for people that maybe aren't familiar with the product, like where can you find it now? Where's the distribution? Because that's interesting to understand as a kind of a milestone in the journey.
Yeah, I mean, the UK market, which is obviously our home market, is one that we're most accessible within. So yeah, approximately 8,500 to 9,000 locations we can be found in across independent health stores, places like Holden and Barrett, Tesco, other supermarkets. So we're not too far away from consumers. We obviously like to be accessible, and obviously through our own website and other partner websites, or even rapid delivery businesses. So we're generally not too far away from consumers' hands, but we know there's so much to do that we want to become more and more available, and over time we will. But the product itself, or the product range that we've created. Once we launched the cream wafer bar, that's when things started to really happen for the brand. And now our unique selling point is essentially taking those. We don't want to do things that are too complicated or too complex. We like to keep it simple with what we do. And really, it's replicating those heritage classic products that exist in the category.
Nice.
And making our plant-based version of them, while using those really superior ingredients, and making sure that quality and taste is what we stand for. By associating ourselves to something that people are familiar with, in a category they may already shop within, allows us to be more accessible. You really reduce that barrier to entry to consumers coming into LoveRaw.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Just on that point then, what is an unvegan vegan? That's a term that's cropped up.
It's a term that's Rimi and Manav coined a few years ago, and I guess really it was at a time before the term flexitarian was sort of widely used in people's vocabulary and understanding. But essentially, it defines a flexitarian consumer. An unvegan vegan is a consumer who is not overtly vegan 24/7, but is a consumer that really represents more of the society of today that will substitute animal-based proteins for more plant-based sustainable options. And that's the consumer that we're trying to appeal to, because they are growing very, very quickly, not just in the UK, but internationally as well.
Interested. Yeah. And how does that kind of strategy of basically keeping the quality of the product at the forefront of the shopper experience and the brand experience work, and how is it working for LoveRaw? Because it's interesting you talk about almost keeping the tried and tested hero product concepts there as a theme, but actually making sure people can access them from a plant-based perspective. How's that kind of like you said, not making it too complex, how that's kind of just simple quality focus on replication working?
Really, really well for us. What I would say is an unvegan vegan is very critical on taste, primarily because by virtue they'll substitute sort of traditional, animal-based proteins for more plant-based options. but they will revert back to those animal-based options, that contain dairy, for instance. So if a consumer went to pick up one of our, cream wafer bars and enjoyed it, but then went back to buy a Kinder Bueno, but preferred that because it tasted better, then really we'd probably lose that customer and we wouldn't maintain that loyalty. So that's why we want to make sure that we champion quality and taste to retain that customer long term. Because if we don't match ourselves on at least taste and quality, there's no real reason for people to buy our brand. They'll just continue to buy the confectionery equivalents that they've enjoyed for many a time.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that vegan consumers are happy to compromise, because they're not. Things have moved on so much particularly over the past 2 or 3 years. We want to retain everybody that buys our brand, because people shouldn't compromise on taste for something that's better for the environment.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That leads nicely on to my next question, actually, because that sort of piece around customer retention, customer lifestyle management, it's very poignant, isn't it? And a kind of pressing convenience, because convenience channel is quite fickle. Lots of opportunities to get in, but quite difficult to maintain momentum if you're not addressing it with its own kind of needs as a channel. Just give us a bit of an insight into how you win in convenience, because it's one of those channels, isn't it, that can make or break a new brand. It's got phenomenal opportunities, but it's tricky, isn't it?
Very, very tricky, and it's no different to sort of the time I enjoyed at Grenade, when we're at this sort of inception point of convenience. It's an industry and category that's been largely dominated by the big brands for decades, traditionally with big budgets. So it's easy to retain and win, and brand awareness is there. So as a challenger brand, when you're entering particularly that category, it's important to pick your battles, because it's not an inexpensive channel to play in. And these retailers are obviously mindful of that themselves. And if you don't have the budget to be everywhere, which most people don't, it's really important to just focus in sort of one area. So where we try to enter the category in convenience ourselves, we're quite fortunate that we can win in 2 categories, really. One which we'd define as sort of healthier snacking, which in truth was one of the pioneering projects that Grenade was so successful in, because they created and defined that fixture, and now you see many brands within it. So because we're a premium product and we are a confectionery product, the chocolate count lines fixture is generally more price led, and it's hard to find anything above sort of £1.30 really. Whereas that healthier snacking is more premium, more need state, and you can find, protein bars, healthy crisps, nuts, seeds, etc. So we've got the opportunity to position ourselves in here, drive success and outperform, to then eventually migrate ourselves into the count lines fixture over time.
Nice.
Which really, that's where success will happen more, because of the frequency of shoppers buying in that area, and visibility. But because we appeal to the chocolate world, we taste great, we look great, we're high quality. If a consumer bought us in the healthier snacking area, we've got a high chance of retaining that customer. But clearly, by what I was saying earlier, we are a chocolate brand. We do want to prioritize positioning in confectionery.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting breakdown. And just kind of leapfrogging from that into kind of another channel that often doesn't get as much attention as convenience and grocery, but has massive opportunities, and lots of startup brands seem to successfully play in it, or have an aspiration to. Tell us a bit about the international development for LoveRaw, and just give us a window into some of the channel levers, the opportunities and the challenges for keeping customers, but also shoppers and consumers happy.
Yeah, so the international role was a bit of a deja vu moment with the first interview I had at Grenade around convenience. It was very new to me, and obviously I've done UK sales for sort of 6 years at that point in time. I knew it very well, and you're comfortable and complacent, but to challenge yourself, going into something completely different is what you need to do. So we've been doing, I personally been doing the international role for sort of around 9 months now. And it is challenging. And from experience traveling around now, it's interesting seeing the UK brand scene internationally, who are the brands that are traveling overseas. And unfortunately, there's not that many when you look at our category in particular. What is consistent from our perspective is zero compromise when it comes to taste and quality. Regardless of where you travel across the world, there's not one country or one individual that's prepared to compromise on that. So long as we as a brand maintain that, we can win hearts and minds of shoppers everywhere across the world. There's just that point around availability.
Yeah.
Going back to a point I made earlier around the growth we saw coming out of the pandemic, there is a slowdown in that growth now, which largely is owed to the fact that of availability isn't in line with consumer demand. So when we're seeing these vegan consumers growing in number, the touch points of where they can buy plant-based products isn't growing in line with that. And that's the same internationally. So we're seeing the same numbers of growth of flexitarians or vegan vegans, but there's a job to do around availability in making sure the product is front and center at these retail stores. But what's really interesting, everywhere you go across the world, is people's mindset is focused around environmental sustainability factors. And when you're a plant-based brand, that really is your breeding ground. You should live that mantra because that's what you're championing. And so we as a brand fit really well within that wider society agenda. And the fact that we're B Corp as well is a real stamp of approval of that. So we've got a great opportunity to really champion that category overseas as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, I guess it comes back to your initial point around making sure that the brand mission is always kept to, even if the solution changes or the challenge changes, you've got to really know what are you looking to solve as a fundamental problem, which, like I say, is about well-being, isn't it? Healthy living, healthy planet. That's interesting. Just taking it back to your career, Liam. I think people will be interested to understand this. You've obviously really benefited from big corporate experience, Tesco's or a subset of them, moving into basically a rocket ship like Grenade that's kind of taken off, defining a category, and now another disruptor. You must have had some good mentors. Just give us an insight into which sales leaders have inspired you to kind of hone your craft as a salesperson. Within that, any resources, books you'd recommend, podcast talks? Obviously, FMCG would cut podcasts, but anything else that you recommend look into for their own personal development when it comes to kind of crafting their career as a sales professional or commercial marketing, whatever it is that's about developing that customer solution?
Yeah, I think in terms of sales mentors and leaders, there's one that really stands out. You always look at key individuals along your career path that have really made a difference or provided you that opportunity. And one individual that I probably still need to thank actually at some stage, would be when I first moved into that NutriCenter role. Lady called Gervais, who I'm sure she won't mind me naming her. But she was my sort of manager at the time and a real mentor in that commercial element. And you go from sort of selling to consumers to then buying for a category. It's completely different.
Yeah.
You're a bit of a rabbit in the headlights at times, like, oh, crap, you need to upskill yourself quickly. So she'd be one that I'd say gave me that real opportunity to move into this sort of sales role, essentially, because without that, I wouldn't have been able to move into the role I had at Grenade or be where I am. But notwithstanding that, I try to keep my mentors quite close to home because I think I always want to surround myself with great people, because surrounding yourself with great people, you'll learn. You never want to be complacent and stagnate because things move on, and if you're not moving with it, you won't develop. So Alan and Juliet at Grenade, fantastic mentors. Two really inspirational founders. Not that kind of don't say like rags to riches, but that small pot of money they started with to where they are today is hugely inspirational. So having the opportunity to work with those guys was fantastic. Even for my role, somebody like a category manager, a guy called Mike, who I used to work with at Grenade, being able to learn that side of sales was really important for me and gave me a real appreciation for that real skill set, which is so hard. And I think, when you're in a challenger brand and you're immersed into, low resource, but surrounded by great people, you've got the opportunity to absorb so much information. So, you appreciation for marketing, or category or operations or finance, you've got a sound understanding of everything. And then moving across to LoveRaw, you can't help but be inspired by Remy and Manark in terms of what they've achieved. Again, two great individuals. So collectively, they would be my mentors, and my sort of inspiration to, anything in reality is possible so long as you work hard, and you're prepared to put the time and an effort. And in terms of sort of like literature and sort of written media that's really important. There's a good book called sort of like How Brands Grow, and it's a really interesting book to show how you can win consumers' hearts and minds around some like mental availability and sort of physical availability, but it gives you an indication of that progress. So it's a really good book for anybody to read, because although it will teach you a lot, it'll give you an insight into sort of the consumer mindset and how you as a brand can align to that.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's really insightful. We'll make sure we drop a link to that resource for people in the comments to have a look at. But look, I'm sure we're at time. We've got 1 minute 30 left. Just very quickly, for those that are listening and enjoying this, where can people find you?
I love Raw.
Yeah, well, no, you yourself kind of on socials, or LoveRaw on socials, just so they can follow the story, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm socially anonymous, and I always have been. My biggest platform, which people always joke about, is I'm very very much up there on LinkedIn. So yeah, mostly I can be found on there, at least a few posts a week. So if you're interested in sort of me and my career and what I'm up to, then you can always follow me on there and catch the latest.
Sound. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on the show, Liam. It's been an absolute blast. Really enjoyed it. If you listened, if you've enjoyed, please do reach out. Thank Liam for his time. More importantly, go and check out LoveRaw. It's a great product. You'll love it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.